Okay, so this is another live sleep story. I did one last week, um, and I'm going to be audio recording this as well. So, what I'll do is, like before, I'll do half an hour of getting your ideas and of letting you kind of settle in, perhaps into bed if you're watching this at bedtime. If you're not, then obviously you're not going to settle into bed. And then I'll record the story and I will edit the audio recording. So anyone who perhaps this is your middle of the day or something like that and you're watching, then and so you may not hang around for the story. I will try, like I did last time, to get a story out for Saturday, editing whatever I record. And what I'll do is uh, edit the story. When I'm telling the story, I'll perhaps pause momentarily if I make an error or anything. I'm going to get the story ideas from yourselves, like before. So I've got notepad. I'll write down your ideas and then get ideas from yourselves. I shared in the community section of my channel that I was doing the live sleep story tonight. I sort of mentioned it a few days ago, mentioned it after the last week's one, saying that I was likely to do another one if people wanted me to. And so if you're not a subscriber, I don't know if you see the community tab. So if you want to know when these go live and when I'm going to be on here live, then just subscribe and watch the community tab. And also, yeah, I've updated to a screen. So also, if you click the bell icon, then you can be. So I'm getting distracted by the comments coming through. If you click the bell icon, then in theory, you should be able to get notifications of when I'm going live and of my various videos. I think I saw someone comment today about not seeing a notification. So you might have to check, but I try and make it as clear as possible. I try and mention it on the community tab. And if this kind of works out, then I'll do this more frequently. And so you'll just get used to the fact that I'm likely to be here live 10 p.m. UK time on here with the story starting at 10:30. So that gives you 30 minutes to give me ideas, to settle in, for people to join us. If I obviously said stories at 10:30, so I'm here at 10:30, then what would happen is I'd start the story and at 10:35 and 10:40 people would be dropping in and having to listen late. So yeah, I've got a screen behind me this time. I've still got the same junk behind the screen, but yeah, screen behind me. It was what we had in the shop that my wife and I, until recently, were running, selling different bits and pieces, including vintage and pre-loved fashion. So we had people trying stuff on, obviously, behind a screen. Yeah, so US is midday at the moment. My reason for doing this at this time, as I said in the last video, is because I want to do something that's at bedtime for my UK audience, whereas most of my audience is actually US, and to do that live would mean going live at about 3 to 4 a.m. my time, and I'm not going to stay awake until 3 or 4 a.m. just so that I can tell a live bedtime story to the US audience, because you'd probably actually just be watching me sleeping instead of telling a story. So unless you find watching someone sleep sends you to sleep, although that might be a bit odd, watching a YouTuber sleeping. Yeah, so just addressing things like there's the comment saying liking stories with sounds of the sea. If you use something like the Slumber app, which I think is currently only available on Apple Apple devices, I don't think there's an Android version yet. You can do things like fade in different sounds. I used to have sounds that I naturally recorded. I live on the near the coast now, but I used to live on the coast, and so I used to record natural sounds like the ocean, and then I'd go out into the middle of the woods and I'd record the sounds in the woods, and I'd go and stand around trees in parks and I'd record sounds there, and I'd have all these as my backing audio to my stories. And for example, there's a version of my Prince's Adventure story where the backing track includes robins singing in trees, where I'm just literally sat under a tree with a microphone recording it. And the number of people who've complained saying they hate the sounds of, in their words, I don't like the sound of all the birds and shit that's in the background. That's kind of the comments that I was getting on it. So I became very aware years and years ago that some people love background natural sounds, other people don't like it. And I've had the same kind of comments with sounds of the ocean as well, and sounds of streams. I've stood near streams and audio recorded that. So yeah, most of my tracks on YouTube used to have different natural sounds to them, but it's kind of hit and miss. So my view is more just record the audio, and if people want natural sounds, then they can do it themselves. You can play two things at once on your computer, or you can listen to the MP3s. Personally, I couldn't care less if someone ripped my videos off YouTube, and if you're using it for yourself, I couldn't care less. Ripped it off YouTube and then added your own backing audio to it or something, if that's what you wanted to kind of customize it. Obviously, all I want is something that's hopefully helpful. Let me scroll up and see what comments I've had here. Bedtime in Belgium, that's good. Climbing up and down Table Mountain. I think I've done one with Table Mountain. I've no idea what the story name was, but I have done a Table Mountain story. Yeah, I also, this is referring to comments and not getting notifications. I rarely get notifications when I've commented on things, and even on my own channel, I don't get notifications when anyone who's commented on videos of mine, um, on comments on videos of mine rather. I don't normally get notifications that you've commented on a comment. So I end up trying to scroll every day. I scroll through all my comments, look for comments. I get notifications on my dashboard about new comments, but I don't get notifications about comments on comments that are already on there, if that makes sense. So I end up kind of having to scroll through and trying to find them and work out the dates and try and see what's what. So if I appear rude, like I haven't replied to something that you might have asked me on another person's comment or something, that's why, because I'm trying to scroll through and find these things. And some videos get lots of comments, others don't get very many. So let's have a look. Yeah, different people like different things. I try and jazz up my stories and change things around. So some people, I do stories where the lead character might be a female, the lead character might be a male, might be a child, could be a different age. Sometimes, obviously, it's an animal as a lead character. I never know what I'm going to do in any one story until I start the story. Sometimes I do it as if you're in the story. So I do it first person and treat it as if you're the character, whoever the character happens to be. Other times I do it kind of third person, and so that it's as if you're watching the character play things out. But also, because these are therapeutic stories that I do and not just bog standard stories, I actually mix and match those bits. So I will, for example, maybe do something in third person where you're watching the character do something, and then a key point where the therapeutic kind of, I want you to kind of be aware of what this is like to experience. So maybe, I don't know, the character's about to be comfortable in a situation that previously might have brought them anxiety or something. Then I would tell that bit in first person, even if I was talking in third person up to that point, so that it associates you into the character for a few moments, while you then almost experience it like seeing through their eyes, hearing what they'd hear, feeling what they'd feel, and then I'll go back. So I kind of jump around a bit sometimes. Some people get a bit irritated by that because they don't know what I'm doing, and they're normally people who, they don't get irritated when I do it face to face. So when I do it in therapy, because it's in therapy, people trust that I know what I'm doing and they just go with the experience, and the feedback is always very positive. Whereas when it's done on YouTube, people don't necessarily grasp that these are therapeutic stories, and so I'm using a lot of other techniques, not just me telling a story. I'm not just telling, just like reading a book. I'm creating a therapeutic story that's designed to hopefully be therapeutic. Right. Having the same problem I had the other day, that everything scrolls past on the live chat bit faster than I can read. Um, yeah, sometimes the deep trance ones I think people quite like. Some of the longer stories, and stories where, um, so I'm giving you some sort of insight into things that I do in the tracks now. So you'll probably start noticing all of these. Um, anytime you have a anytime you have movement, that deepens an experience. So what you learn when you're learning hypnosis is that by having movement, it keeps you moving deeper into something. So we pick up on the metaphor of the movement, and so you go deeper. So if you have paths, or say walking down a garden or walking through a meadow, so any kind of walking, that's movement. So anything like that, any movement deepens hypnosis, or deepens that inward focus of the person listening, as does any transition. So it could be walking through a gate, that's a transition. It could be walking from a meadow into woodland, that's a transition. It could be transitioning from woodland to being on the coastline. So anytime you have kind of a transition there, it could be you reach out and touch a mirror, and your hand goes straight through the mirror, and you find that you can walk through the mirror, and so you're now the other side of the mirror. So there's a transition. So every single transition deepens the experience. Every bit of movement deepens the experience. So that's why I use a lot of movement and transitions and things, like having someone, for example, falling asleep and then having an experience within a dream, because that dream was a transition. Um, inspiration for the stories, I create them like I'm going to here. I just do it. I have different things that, obviously I have my own beliefs and my own views on things, and things that I quite like. So I'm not a Buddhist, I'm not religious at all, but I like a lot of Buddhist stories, and a lot of philosophical things, and I like a lot of mythology. And so I kind of draw upon lots of those bits and pieces. I've always liked spirituality and things. So you can notice that there are certain trends to what I do, just because of me being who I am and the kind of direction I take. Likewise, I love nature. I love being out in nature. I love being in the woods. I love being by the sea. I find that really calming for myself. So I end up inevitably having a lot of nature in my stories. And I love fine detail. I love experience, like the process of having an experience. Like, I've spoken a lot in the past about being autistic, and as a sort of 8-year old, sitting in the woods, trying to overcome kind of everything being overwhelming. And so I would sit in a tree and I'd close my eyes and I'd focus on pinpointing the sound of one bird and try and focus, where is that bird in space, in context with where I am. And I try and recreate the woodland that I'm in to recreate where that bird is and sort of pinpoint it and then create the whole external thing inside my head and work out exactly what's going on with its bird song. And so I'd get really into the detail to try and narrow my focus, and that would help me to calm down and relax and learn, obviously now as an adult, to manage going on things like trains that get very packed. Yes, thank you, Elizabeth, for not being irritated by my stories. Yeah, enjoyed hypnotic inductions I did 4 or 5 months ago. I've got quite a few hypnotic inductions knocking around my channel, not just stories. One reason why I talk about them being hypnotic stories is because storytelling is actually one of the oldest forms of hypnosis. Hypnosis is just the process of narrowing focus of attention and increasing responsiveness. And that's what happens with good storytelling, that you're narrowing focus of attention, you're increasing the responsiveness, people's heart rate speeds up perhaps when they hear certain parts of a story, or maybe they relax to another part of a story. The other really old form of hypnosis is music. So storytelling and music kind of go hand in hand with culture and with inducing altered states, managing to kind of direct our state of being. And both fascinate me. I'm not very good at music, but it does fascinate me. Um, do I have any stories to help with inspiration and drive to carry it out? I can't remember. I might do. Some of my older stories, if you sort of scroll back to my older stories, um, were themed. I was doing stories like for weight loss and grief and different single topics. And what I found the difficulty was, and why I don't do it anymore, is that when I was doing that, um, people wouldn't listen to my stories. So, say I had a weight loss story, that story is perfectly fine for someone who doesn't want to lose weight. It's not like someone who's a perfectly ideal weight is going to listen to it and start losing weight. Um, but people would think that's what might happen. So they wouldn't listen to the stories and wouldn't benefit from the fact they could still fall asleep to it. And I can't explain that at the beginning of every story, because or else everyone will be just dropping timestamps into all the comments saying he doesn't actually start the story until like 15 minutes into this video or something. Um, so I decided not to do themed stories like that, like themed around an issue, and instead, so I stopped all that and then instead just focused on, right, all my stories will be to do with helping someone to sleep, obviously, but also helping to manage stress and anxiety and worry. So they're the three things I target all my stories for the last 2 years or so, at least, on doing, helping to manage stress, worry, and anxiety, um, and hopefully send people to sleep. And let's see what comments we've got here. I've occasionally used historical events in my stories. I haven't necessarily intentionally gone out of my way to teach things, but I do tie in historical things sometimes, specific events, and I tie in things like scientific discoveries and different bits and pieces that I think are interesting facts into my stories and weave them in some way. I don't know what my favorite story is that I've done so far. Possibly, I quite like my one with the autistic child, the teddy bear's picnic one, because it kind of reminds me of me. That's kind of what I had in my head while I was doing it. Not that I ever did teddy bear's picnics, but the idea of going out and exploring the way the child did. Um, Obviously, the how did I teach myself to do what I do? Yes and no. I have evolved what I do, but that's not where I started. Um, so I started off learning hypnosis as a teenager, meditation around the same kind of time, and then in my early 20s, I trained um, as a hypnotherapist. All along through all of this, I have also worked within the caring profession and done lots of training within the caring profession to work like in family therapy and things like that. In fact, that's despite what I'm known for online, the area I've got the most experience is in family therapy, helping parents to help their kids to stop misbehaving, to reduce youth offending, antisocial behaviour, um, get kids back into school, all those sort of things. So I've got vastly more experience with that than anything else. And So yeah, so I just sort of learned hypnotherapy, trained as a hypnotherapist. About 2007-ish, I started teaching hypnotherapy uh, to others, and created and started teaching hypnotherapy diploma course, and have just kind of evolved what I knew about storytelling from within hypnotherapy and within, for example, I was doing storytelling type stuff similar to this when I was working in children's homes, um, to help get the kids to fall asleep who have often been abused and struggled to fall asleep at night. And so I would sit next to them and I'd read bedtime stories to them, tell bedtime stories, and I'd send the kids to sleep. And then I'd leave the room and the child would sleep the rest of the night. And the other staff would ask what on earth I'm doing in the rooms to make these kids sleep. So I taught the other staff in the homes what I was doing. And then when I got into doing parenting work and supporting parents, I started teaching parents how to use stories to send their kids to sleep. And when YouTube came about, I just started doing the same, but with adults on here. And so that's kind of how I sort of merged into that. And I'd done like, training around using stories and metaphors in relation to child therapy and kind of been involved in all that for years, but have done my own kind of thing since then, doing it in my own way. Because normally you just end up focusing on like one or two metaphors. And I thought, well, can't you just package the whole lot as a story and essentially do storytelling therapy? Um, and I quite like storytelling therapy because the way the brain works is through pattern matching. So your brain kind of picks up on one thing and well, it's a bit like the fact that there can be millions of different thrillers with different storylines, but essentially the pattern underlying all those thrillers is pretty much the same pattern. And that's how the brain works. And so you can tell stories, and that way you allow clients to do their own therapy. You don't say, you need to go and do this and you need to go and do that. Instead, you just tell a story using the client's metaphors. So I've got courses obviously on my website. I've got a course teaching this. I've got a video on YouTube of me teaching and demonstrating this with a real client in front of a live audience, where she just tells me what she wants to work on. And I take all of her metaphors that she's used in her description, telling me what her problem is, and I turn that into a story. And she gives her feedback at the end of the video, and she has this profound kind of experience of what happened from that one story, and that's what you often get. So, right, let me have a quick look, and then I want some ideas from you. Uh, 7-11 breathing is a very good thing to wind down and calm yourself. That is where you breathe out longer than you breathe in. So when your out breath triggers the relaxation response, your in breath triggers kind of the stress response. So if you breathe out longer than you breathe in, you trigger the relaxation response more than the stress response. And so you relax more than getting stressed. And so that can help. Um, Obviously, stories can help as well, or meditations. So I'm just going to write down baby elephant. I'll see if I can squeeze a baby elephant in there somewhere. Yeah, you don't want to overthink it. Um, so what I want from people, baby elephant, in my neatest handwriting. I had a problem. I wrote stuff down the other day and couldn't read what my handwriting said. Um, yes, with any, I don't want to sort of get too taken off track from what I'm about to talk about, but I just wanted to respond to something I saw. Active listening thing. Yeah, the best advice I can give to anyone is to always find what's right for you. So, for example, I had someone on a course I taught who said, no one's ever been able to get me to relax. I've tried meditations, I've tried hypnosis, I've tried all sorts of things. It won't work. You won't be able to relax me. And this was in front of a live audience. And I found out that he was a mountain biker, and he'd often, obviously, raced down mountains and things, or difficult tracks on his bike. So I told a story about that. And he got so absorbed in the story about mountain biking, which is something that was familiar to him. It was something he was happy to have in his mind and recall and think about, that worked for him. So he had ADHD, and he said, nothing ever relaxes me. But that's because everyone was saying to him, okay, just close your eyes and be relaxed and calm, and language that he needed to hear. He needed to hear about that struggling up a hill, and bombing down the other side, and the adrenaline, the excitement. That's what he needed to hear to relax. He didn't need to hear relax, relax. Um, so it's about making sure that you use the approach that's right for you as a being, not an approach that the therapist thinks, oh, everyone has to have this approach, or the meditation person thinks everyone has to go this way. Um, so horse-drawn carriage. So throw out some ideas that I can absorb into the story. I will try and write a bunch of them down. No idea how I'm going to get from a baby elephant and horse-drawn carriage to an underwater jellyfish, but let's see what happens. Horse-drawn carriage, jellyfish. Now, this is pretty much how I do my stories. And I like as little detail as possible, ideally. So we've got a fox this time. I think someone mentioned last time about not wanting, or why do I always have wolves? I think I've only got 6 stories with wolves in. Clouds, a snake. That depends how everyone feels about having a snake in it. Some people can get scared of snakes. Well, clouds and a clear starry night. If I can read my handwriting. Aliens and potatoes. That's a bit different. Maybe the aliens look like potatoes. I don't know. A boat. Fireworks. Right, I'm going to start in just a moment. So if people start getting themselves comfortable and ready, and I'm just going to look and see what else is here. Wolves are awesome. Hot air balloon. Write that down somewhere here. all I've got to do is be able to read my handwriting. Talking of Nessie, I went and stayed on Loch Ness in a boat for a while when I was a teenager. Hunting for Nessie, obviously, as you do when you're a teenager. Right, so I've written down a few bits and pieces. In my finest scribbly handwriting. So it's 10:30. You want to see my handwriting? It's very scruffy. When I was in school, I had a primary school teacher write on my work. His handwriting looks like a spider's crawled across it, and I thought that was brilliant. And so I thought I've got to keep doing more of that. So, right. So get yourself comfortable. Obviously, don't be listening to this if you're driving along. Hopefully, you're in bed. And yep, dim your screens. And as you listen to this, you can take a moment to let your eyes close and let yourself begin to relax. And as you begin to relax, I'm just going to tell a story in the background. And as I tell that story in the background, I don't know whether you'll relax deeper with the sound of my voice or the spaces between my words. And as you begin to drift comfortably asleep, you can have a sense of somebody out on a sailing boat. And they're out on a sailing boat just as the sun's setting out on the sea, just a little way out from shore. And they can hear the water gently lapping against the side of the boat, and the wind catching the sail. And the slight breeze on their face. And as the sun is setting, they can notice the changing colour of the light on the clouds, noticing that toward the sunset, the clouds are redder, oranger, and looking the other way, they're darker and bluer. And just moving gently across the sky. And looking over towards the sunset, they can notice the way the sun glistens on the surface of the ocean, and moves as the waves gently roll by. And that boat can just gently rock as it glides calmly through the water. And then while the sun dips below the horizon, The silvery, twinkling light of the moon can sparkle its way across the sea from the other side. And the lower the sun goes, the more stars can begin to appear overhead, twinkling into existence. And as the eyes begin to adapt to the dark, so they can begin to notice the Milky Way arching its way across the sky. And then after a little while, they drop an anchor and they decide they're going to go on a night dive. And they get into their scuba gear. They waddle over to the side of the boat. And on the calm, still night, they plop over the side into the water. Letting out some air from their jacket. They begin to lower themselves down under the water. They hook themselves on to the anchor rope and continue lowering themselves down under the water. And they flick on their underwater torch. They can hear the bubbles with each out breath rising and bubbling to the surface, and see the way as those bubbles rise gracefully to the surface. The bubbles catch the glistening moonlight. As they gently and calmly move the torch around, looking around themselves under the water. And they're aware how time seems to slow right down underwater. Everything seems to become so peaceful and relaxing. Their breathing deepens and relaxes as they continue lowering themselves down. So they notice they're heading down through some jellyfish, just off slightly in the distance. And they notice the way those jellyfish have bioluminescence, and their movements make a light show. And they look like something almost otherworldly. As they continue to lower down into the water, and while they continue lowering down in the water, they're heading down towards a wreck, and they follow that anchor rope all the way down to the surface underwater, and notice as they approach it how it's got a white kind of colour to it. It's got a slight blue tinge from the moonlight above. And they go all the way down to the wreck, and they see different fish swimming through the wreck, seaweed just waving and swaying in the current. And remaining attached to the anchor rope. They unfurl their attachment from themselves a little bit, giving them some more slack, and they swim into the wreck. They find their way to the front of this boat, and with each kick of their fins, soft sand creates a cloud behind them, and they scan the way forward with their torch until they find where they're looking for, and they enter a room in this wreck. They go over to a safe in this room, and they prise open the rusting safe and take a scroll out of that safe and pop it into a bag they've got attached to them. And they find their way back out from the wreck, back to the rope, and start ascending again. And they very slowly and gently rise their way back up towards the surface, taking their time, watching as different fish swim around them, almost as if the fish are more inquisitive than they are, rising up through the jellyfish, which part out of their way, all the way back up to their boat, and back on their boat. They change into their normal clothes, go inside the boat, and carefully unroll the wet scroll. And they notice that the scroll still has writing on it, and it has a map on it and a cross, which obviously marks the position of what they're looking for. And they know that's what they're going to go searching for in the morning. And with a sense of accomplishment and excitement, they go to bed, relax down in the bed, close their eyes, and feel the way the boat sways with the waves, almost rocking them gently asleep. And as they drift asleep, so they begin to dream. And they dream about being in a city in England 150 years earlier, hearing the clip clop of horses, the rumbling of carriage wheels on cobbled streets, the background hum of people talking to each other, and realize that as this forms in their mind, they're sitting in the back of a horse-drawn cart, bobbing up and down on suspension of the cart as it travels over a cobbled street. And they pull back the curtain of the carriage, look out the window at the houses they're passing, the people in the street, at the way people are so elegantly dressed in suits, hats, and beautiful dresses. They see dogs walking with owners, cats roaming the streets. They hear birds overhead. And the cart stops near a market. And they exit the cart and walk into the market, hearing the hustle and bustle of the market increase in volume, noticing how everyone seems to be focused on their task at hand, and that from an outside perspective it can almost look chaotic. And they know they're here to buy a few bits and also to meet someone. But as this is their dream, they don't know who or what, they just have that sense. And they're excited to discover how their dream is going to unfold. And they buy some fruit and they buy some veg. And the last person they go to is the guy with the large hat selling potatoes. And they buy some of the potatoes and look up at the guy and realize he's a smiling grey alien, and that this is the person they've come to talk to. And after the purchase, the alien asks the person to go with them. And so they follow the alien away from the market, down a side street, down another side street, where it's getting quieter and quieter Further away from the market they go. And then they walk towards a door at the end of another street. But instead of going to the door, the alien turns to face the wall, presses a brick, and hearing the sound of moving brick wall, a section of the brick wall slides back and left out the way, with a slight puff of dust, opening up a path. And they walk down that path to some steps. And they walk down the 10 steps, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, all the way down those steps. And the alien leads the person over to 2 comfortable chairs. And they sit down in those comfortable chairs. And it seems the most civilized and unusual experience. The alien pours the 2 of them a drink, and they sit in front of a warm fire, holding what seems to be a perfectly normal conversation in this very unnormal situation. And the alien gives some knowledge, some wisdom about an experience they'll be going on in the morning. As if somehow this alien knows something about what they'll be doing tomorrow that they don't know themselves. And almost as soon as this experience appeared, it begins to fade away. And the person drifts into the most profound and comfortable, deep sleep. And then, with the sounds of seagulls around the boat, an increased awareness of the sloshing of the water on the side of the boat, morning comes round. The person feels the warmth of the sun shining through the window on his face. And they wake up, get ready for the day, and get their boat into the shore. Before travelling out into the middle of a savannah. And it takes them half a day to travel all the way out to the middle of that savannah. And they know what it is they're looking for. They've got the scroll with them. And they start searching through this savannah, looking at the map, trying to work out from the map on the scroll what it relates to with what they can see. And they start looking through binoculars. They can see a herd of elephants. noticing some baby elephants holding on to the adults' tails, and they're sure those elephants are almost skipping along, almost having too much fun, and that the adult elephants were trying to keep them in check. You could see a family of lions, and they continued their journey through the savannah until they found an unusually large tree. And this unusually large tree happened to be where the X marks the spot. And they walked over to the tree, reached out, ran their fingers around the bark of the tree, and noticed there was a gap in the base of this tree. And they crawled into that gap, finding some stairs. And they knew they had to descend these stairs. And they descended the stairs. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, all the way to the bottom of the stairs, where they saw something unusual. It looked like an orangey coloured fox with the bushiest, most beautiful tail, looking so friendly, with a slight blue glow around it. And they felt from their dream the night before they had to trust the experience and trust this fox would show them the way. And so they followed that fox down a long tunnel until it opened out into a vast cavern. They could hear running, flowing water and realize there's a river coming from somewhere flowing through this cavern, leading off to a waterfall. And they arrived at the river. They could feel the spray of the water on their face. The fox seemingly vanished as they continued the journey on their own, following along the edge of the river to the waterfall, climbing down the side of the waterfall to an underground lake. And as they walked away from the waterfall around the side of that underground lake, so the water calmed in the lake, and the further from the waterfall they got, the calmer that water became. And they could see in the middle of a lake was this tiny island, and on that island they could see a chest. And they lowered themselves gently into the water to test its temperature. And they found that water was comfortably warm. And they swam to that middle island, went to the chest, opened the chest, and found a medallion in the chest. And as they held that medallion, so they suddenly felt this beam of blue light passing through their head, down through their body, bringing peace and calm and deep relaxation, followed by wisdom and knowledge of an ancient civilization that visited the earth thousands of years earlier, that had interacted with the humans on earth and had left this medallion to pass on their knowledge and their wisdom. And now, in this generation, this was the person to have that wisdom. And as that wisdom and knowledge passed inside them, so they knelt down, closed their eyes, and allowed themselves to receive that wisdom. And while it flowed into them, they started drifting almost into a reverie, as if they were up on the surface, looking around the savannah, kneeling down on the surface, on a bright and hot day. And while looking around on this bright and hot day, they noticed the light beginning to change, the sounds of the animals softening and then going quiet. They noticed that the moon is moving across the sun, and within minutes, there's just a ring of light in the sky, with streams of light coming from that ring, and a blanket of stars twinkling, and silence on the savannah. And almost as soon as it began, so the ring looked like a diamond ring, and the sun began to appear again, and the animals began to make sounds again, and the wisdom was being transmitted into this person. And they could see fireworks in the distance as the eclipse was transitioning, and hear the distant bang of the fireworks. And they couldn't work out whether that was inside their head with what they were receiving, or a representation of that. They just went with it, allowed it to be absorbed with them, before finding themselves once again resting by that chest as the light began to fade and the wisdom was within them, and they placed that medallion back where they found it, knowing that the wisdom had been transmitted. They swam back across the lake. They found the way back out of the cave and out of the tree. They travelled across the savannah, and before they went home, they decided to go up in a hot air balloon, see what this area looks like, take in its beauty, and enjoy the silence of floating above the savannah, gazing down, enjoying a hot air balloon ride, with the occasional burst of hot air, seeing the elephants, seeing lions, herds of other animals, before ending the day, travelling back to their boat, relaxing down in the boat, and drifting and floating comfortably, relaxed, asleep.